afternoon, viewers. Thank you for tuning in to Recount Watch. I am Vanelda Harris, and joining me this afternoon is our Prime Minister in waiting, Brigadier Mark Phillips. Brigadier, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you for having me on the program this afternoon, Vanelda, and hello to our viewers. I'm happy to be here again on Recount Watch to deal with the issues at hand.
Yes, so Brigadier, how are you feeling now that we're close to the end of the recount and we see a clear gap between the PPPC and the opposition? Because right now, the last update that we received was that the PPPC was leading by over 16,000 votes.
Well, you know, Vanelda, I don't want to sound triumphant. I don't want to appear euphoric here. It's not a cause for celebration, but it's a cause to let people know that we feel vindicated. We knew after the close of poll on March 2nd, as the SOP started to come in to, you know, our copies of the SOPs, started coming from GCOM to Freedom House, and I know similarly copies went to the headquarters for the coalition campaign, whether it's Congress Place or the place they use at Camp on Lamaha, wherever they had the headquarters, they were in receipt of the SOPs. What we did, we tabulated our SOPs and we waited on GCOM because the regulations stated clearly, only GCOM can verify the results. We went through the verification process after we'd have done our own tabulation. And here I'm saying that after we did our tabulation, we knew by close of business on Tuesday, the 3rd of March, that the PPPC was in the lead and the PPPC was victorious at the election. But as I said, the regulation stated clearly, only GCOM can do the verification of the results and declare the results. So we waited, we adhered to the instructions, we worked with GCOM, and we would have seen the results declared for regions 1, 2, 3, regions 5, region 6, region 7, region 8, region 9, region 10. And we waited at the Ashman building along with the GCOM officials, presided over by Mr. Mingo, who was, you know, was the returning officer of Region 4. And we would have verified 421 statements of polls. And after then, things went haywire. Mr. Mingo refused to verify the remainder of statement of polls. He tried to make an announcement, and we disagreed with that announcement, and we let him know, you know, clearly that we were in disagreement. The diplomats were there, all the international local observers were there. They were all in disagreement because basically what he did, he stopped the process of verification and tried to declare a result for Region 4. Everybody, you know, was in disagreement with what he did there. And you know the history. It went through the courts. We came to the point where the leaders agreed to this recount process. It was a long road. It was a long struggle. People are still working because we're still counting the last 10% of the ballot boxes. Will be counted between today and tomorrow. And if they haven't finished the count by tomorrow, definitely on Monday it was finished. So it was a long road, a long struggle for democracy in Guyana. And we are happy that we're at the end or near the end of this recount process. And of course, we have an unassailable lead, 16,341 as of last evening. And I know with every box that will be counted today and tomorrow, and possibly on Monday, It will increase the lead for the PPPC. But more than that, it will, at the end of the process, it will vindicate what the PPPC has been saying all along. We won these elections. Mr. Mingo committed fraud at these elections. The only fraud, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the fact is that the statements of recount have been matching the statements of poll that GCOM issued, that the APNU AFC even has copies of, but refused to release up until now. Nobody has been able to see the statements of poll in the possession of APNU AFC, but we have our copies. And like you said, we would have tabulated since the night was taking place. And the same way that we would have known that we won these elections by over 15,000 votes, the same way the APNU AFC knew the very next day that they lost these elections.
Definitely, and that's the reason why Mr. Mingo did his mischief on the 5th of March. And you know, I was just looking at the statements of recount for 5 areas, from Buxton right down to Buxton Friendship, right down to Enterprise, right? And you see the inflation by Mr. Mingo. In some cases, 30 more votes, in some cases, 50 more votes, in some cases, 80 more votes, you know? So there's a trend. Huh?
Even 100 votes and more.
Even 100 in some cases. There's a trend in the coalition strongholds. He inflate the coalition votes. In the PPP strongholds, he not only inflate the coalition votes, but he deflates or reduces the PPP votes. So as I said before, every box that we count or recount from now until the end will continue to show Mr. Mingo's mischief. The only credible evidence of any wrongdoing in this election is the evidence pointed to Mr. Mingo. And I find it strange that, notwithstanding the long list of frivolous allegations, they have not included Mr. Mingo's name, Mr. Mingo's mischief in those lists of allegations. Mr. Mingo then should be at the top. Huh?
I was just about to say that we keep hearing all of these narratives coming out of the APNU AFC. And we know that they're getting desperate day by day, especially as the recount is coming to an end. And we can see clearly that the SORs are matching the SOPs that we have put out there. And the APNU AFC is getting desperate more and more every day and coming up with different narratives, talking about dead migrated persons voting. But we have not heard up until this point anyone from the APNU AFC addressing Mingo's fraud.
Exactly. And you know, as you talk about the lists of showing the dead and the migrated voted, you know, I'm still surprised that the Commissioner of Police, who is also the Chief Immigration Officer of Guyana, has allowed a flawed list to be submitted to GCOM under his signature, under his name, under his watch. A list which, as of yesterday, had 210 names that were in error. 210 people who claimed that they were here and they were able to substantiate that they were here in Guyana, and they were on his list. A flawed list. So these allegations remain frivolous. I know a number of leaders from the coalition are facing the media, and they're talking that they have credible evidence. But I'm saying again, let them compile, let them hold their credible evidence, await the end of this recount process, await the declaration, and then they can go before the court in the form of a petition with all the credible evidence. And I'm pleading with them, please include Mr. Mingo's misconduct as part of their list of credible evidence that they are going to take before the courts in the form of a petition. And don't make noise over small issues. I mean, if you check the papers today, you note that in another act of desperation, they're accusing us of some conspiracy right now, right? The conspiracy with regards to the boxes that did not have the ancillary documents inside. The boxes that had the important documents, that is the ballots, right? The paper on which the people voted were in the box. And there are some other little things like, poll book and folio and all these things that were not in the box. What they're saying in the media, and you check Chronicle paper, they're saying that it's a conspiracy to, and they're trying to make a representation to the GCOM chair to invalidate those votes. But those votes are valid. They are in the box. The box was sealed. Those ancillary documents are with Mr. Lowenfield. And there's a reason why they're not in the box as it happened in other boxes. It's because the presiding officer, minutes before the close of poll, passed specific instructions how to handle those documents. And you know who's the presiding officer? Mr. Mingo. He uses clerk, one Cicely Duncan, according to the DROs and the POs. The presiding officer, sorry, the returning officer.
Returning officer for Region 4.
Returning officer, Mr. Mingo. He passed specific instruction to one of his clerk, Cicely Duncan.
Carlin Duncan.
Carlin Duncan, I have the name wrong, sorry. Carlin Duncan, to have the presiding officers follow his instructions not to put those ancillary documents in the box. However, by now, all the presiding officers who received that instructions has already submitted their statements confirming that indeed that instruction was passed, and they will have to count those votes in those ballots. So those votes for the wider consumption of Guyanese society who are listening, those votes are valid. There's no way those votes can be deemed invalid because the presiding officer was following the instructions of the returning officer. And those ancillary documents are in the possession of Mr. Lowenfield. He confirmed that.
And Brigadier, I just want to take some time to read a letter. I know that you would have seen this letter also, but just for the viewers to understand, we have a letter here that one of the deputy returning officers would have written to the chair of GCOM to refute the claims of APNU AFC, especially because they're trying to invalidate the votes, and they're basically throwing the staff that would have worked on elections day at those polling stations under the bus in order to suppress the will of the Guyanese people for their own selfish agenda. And so let me just take a minute or so to read the letter. It says, "Dear Madam Chair, please be informed that instructions were given by Ms. Carlin Duncan, the clerk to the returning officer, Mr. Claremont Mingo of District Number 4, to include only unused, valid, and rejected ballots in the ballot boxes. This was communicated to the respective presiding officers who complied. As a result, the other documents were placed in the bag provided. This instruction, was given on election day a few hours before the close of the poll. Other deputy returning officers affected by this decision confirmed the same. All for your information and guidance, and it was signed by Paul Jai Singh, Deputy Returning Officer, was stationed at Chattanooga Primary. So there we have persons coming out and refuting those claims. They would have received these instructions that came from the clerk to Mr. Claremont Mingo.
Exactly.
See, we've been seeing fraud that would have been committed by Mr. Mingo. And so this here is actually no surprise. But then to try to invalidate the votes, I heard just 2 days ago, Roxanne Myers, the Deputy Chief Elections Officer, would have instructed the staff, the supervisors at the recount to include in the observation report, not validate or to invalidate those votes in those boxes. And I find it very strange that when we started the recount of East Coast of Demerara, which we know has PPP strongholds, that is when they decided to make a change, because Brigadier, other cases we would have had missing poll books, even in APNU strongholds. And just a note was made on those observation reports. No votes were invalidated. So why, when you're now in the PPPC strongholds, now you want votes to be invalidated?
Well, you know, this matter, I'm happy that this matter was ventilated. I was there yesterday when they seized the tabulation of the statements of recount from these areas. And the decision was what was tabulated, okay, that gone ahead, but what has not been tabulated, to put it aside so that the GCOM commissioners under the chairperson will now have to deliberate on the way forward. And I'm confident that the word invalidate will not be included in any of the observation report. And I'm confident that these ballots will be counted as part of the recount process. And I'm saying this because I still have faith in the commissioners of GCOM, who will sit, who will deliberate, and once they use a rational approach, they will only arrive at one conclusion. And that conclusion is to include these ballots in the recount process, not to deem them as being invalidated. And I'm confident that they will be included.
And the fact is that Guyanese want their votes counted. I mean, it's
Exactly.
over 3 months. It's over 3 months now since we've had elections. There is no legitimate government in place. The Guyanese people are struggling right now. There is no government in there to represent them. And we've seen statements coming out of the international community. I saw just yesterday the ABCE issued a statement and reminding Granger that he would have committed to respecting the results that come out of this recount, which so far has been transparent, it has been credible, and we're seeing that the PPPC is on the road to victory. But we hope that, and the international community is re-emphasizing the fact that Granger made this commitment, and we're hoping that at the end of this, we will have a peaceful transition of government.
Exactly. All the reports so far, all the observers report, the report from the OAS, the report from the European UN Observer Mission, the report from CARICOM, the report from the Commonwealth, the interim report from the Commonwealth, all those reports speak to a very good day of polling on March the 2nd. It was peaceful, you know, it was transparent, and it was credible. All those reports.
Also, APNU said this, Granger said it, Basil Williams said it.
Exactly, everybody said it. I think I said it too. But then in those same reports, they also mentioned that the events or the incidents that occurred subsequent to polling day, especially on the 4th and the 5th of March. And here we're talking about the tabulation and verification of the Region 4 statement of poll. They all express concern that the Region 4 statement of poll has damaged the credibility of the elections in Guyana. And you know what? All the APNU AFC has done so far with all those reports of that nature is to accuse the agencies of interference in Guyana's, internal matters. Now, I mean, all of us do a lot of reading, and there are many commentators out there who are writing, and clearly they're reminding us that Guyana pursues its national, regional, and international interests through a number of activities and through membership of many regional and international organizations. CARICOM is listed, the OAS is listed, the Commonwealth is listed. Those people who lead those organizations that I mentioned all committed themselves to send observer missions to Guyana. And the most we can do is to read, study, accept the reports from those observer missions, and do things better. In fact, all those reports are telling us right now, along with the diplomats from the ABCE countries who recently sent a letter, and the bipartisan senators who also wrote a letter to Mr. Granger. All of them are asking, all of them are pleading with Mr. Granger and the leaders of our political party, all political parties, to accept the results of the recount. The PPPC has no problem with that. We already said up front, the recount is the gold standard after what happened with Mr. Mingo, and we had to go into the court system. The recount will be the gold standard, and we're committed to supporting, to respecting, and to accepting the results of this recount of the votes. It so happened that we are in the lead, we are victorious, and there's only one reason why we're in the lead. Is because the PPPC campaign strategy has caused us to be in the lead. We went to every corner of Guyana. We shared our manifesto with the people. We communicated our plans for development of Guyana. The people listened to us, and the people voted overwhelmingly for the PPPC. We ran a transparent campaign. We expect transparency in the results. We didn't get that because of Mr. Mingo's action. We have a recount process now, and we support the transparent conduct of the recount process. We respect the outcome, and we are awaiting the outcome. We have 2 or 3 more days to go before we finish counting the proverbial last ballot box, which perhaps may also include evidence of Mr. Mingo's misconduct. That proverbial last ballot boxes will be counted either tomorrow or on Monday. May very well include evidence of Mr. Mingo's misconduct. What is important is respect for the rule of law in Guyana. What is also important, is respect for the will of the people. Because as I said before, we already committed to respecting the declaration of the results of this process once it remains transparent. We are aware of the desperate actions by this coalition. I heard that there was a disruption of the the recount process this morning. There was a gathering. I don't know if it was a church service or whatever, but 8 o'clock is the start time. And to do anything that disrupts the start time, you know, from 8 o'clock is a disruption of the process, is a desperate action. We don't need any more desperate actions. We don't need to be euphoric. All we need is for the APNU AFC to continue being part of this process, to continue respecting this process, and not to derail this process, and to respect the results at the end of the process, and to take all their so-called credible evidence to the courts at the end of this process. Because this process is to recount the ballots and to declare in a quantitative manner on the recount of the ballots. All this, what they're talking about, but qualitative and credible evidence and you know, and all these things and so, take all of those qualitative information, convert it into credible evidence. Of course, Mr. Mingo's misconduct will be included there and go before the court. There's a whole separate exercise.
And the fact is too that GCOM does not have the authority to deal with that.
Exactly.
So there's the only recourse that they have is to go to the courts after this process is completed.
And you know what?
GCOM doesn't have the authority to do any investigations in that regard.
And you know what I want to say about that? What you just said, GCOM has no authority to invest itself and to deal with those matters. The entire leadership of the APNU AFC knows that. They have a higher percentage of legal minds in their leadership than in any other political party. And they know that. They knew that before they started this whole process. They knew that before they started compiling the frivolous allegations. You know, and the commissioners, all the commissioners, they're clear, they're knowledgeable of the fact that GCOM cannot investigate itself. And all these allegations, all this credible evidence can only be dealt with in a separate manner, separate from the declaration of the results in the courts of Guyana. So I just want to impress upon all the leaders there, all the political leaders, whether it be a commissioner on GCOM, and I know some of the commissioners like to face the press, and while they're talking for themselves, there are many of the viewers is of the impression that they're talking for the entire commission. The only person that speaks for the entire commission, as far as I'm concerned, is the chair or the PRO.
Yes. Brigadier, spending some time with us today. Do you have any final words that you want to tell our viewers before we go?
The final words to our viewers: be calm, remain calm, continue to follow the process. Okay? Pay specific and careful attention to what is being communicated, not only by your leaders from your respective political parties, but also from the public relations officer of GCOM. And I'm confident that if we do that, the rest of this recount process will be concluded in keeping with the level of transparency that we all expect, and there will be peace in Guyana as we transition after the results are declared. So let us be calm, let us be peaceful, let us continue to observe and monitor what is going on and listen to all the communications that is coming, and stay far from any acts of violence or any acts of desperation that can derail the whole process, that can derail the peaceful environment that we're all enjoying at present. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Brigadier, and viewers. Thank you for joining us. You heard it from our, like we've said many times before, the statements of recount continue to match the statements of and you would see that the PPPC, as you said many times before, our SOPs have shown that, and it's just for the statements of recount, which continue to validate. Recounts come out, you guys are going to see. Mango's fraud is continuing to be unraveled every day. PPPC is continuing to fight for democracy and to ensure that every single Guyanese that voted, you elected, legitimately sworn into office when the time comes. Viewers,